The first time Neptune spoke Grandpa S words, I nearly dropped my coffee mug on the hardwood floor. The African grey parrot had been unusually quiet since Grandpa S passing, perched stoically in his ornate brass cage by the bay window that overlooked the garden. But that morning, as sunlight streamed into Grandpa S' colonial-style home, now my home, Neptune ruffled his silver feathers, tilted his head, and perfectly mimicked my grandfather S' gravelly voice. "Roselyn, remember the oak. What S buried wanted to stay hidden forever. My name is Roselyn Harper, and until that moment, I'd been peacefully sorting through Grandpa Patrick S' belongings, organizing what to keep and what to donate. The house had fallen silent without his booming laughter and endless stories. Neptune's sudden channeling of my grandfather sent a chill down my spine. "What did you say?" I whispered, moving closer to the cage. Neptune merely blinked his intelligent eyes and went back to preening his feathers as if nothing had happened. I stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, replaying the words in my mind. Grandpa Patrick had been a mysterious man in many ways, charming and generous but private about certain aspects of his life. He'd raised me after my parents died in an accident when I was young, and while our relationship had been filled with love, there were rooms in his past he'd kept locked. The oak. There was indeed a massive oak tree in the backyard, its sprawling branches casting dappled shadows across the lawn. Grandpa had always been peculiarly protective of that tree, refusing to let landscapers touch it and spending hours sitting beneath it in quiet contemplation. I dismissed Neptune S words as a random phrase my grandfather must have uttered around the parrot. Everyone knew African greys were exceptional mimics. Still, something about the timing and clarity of the message left me unsettled. That night I couldn't sleep. The old house creaked and settled around me, and through my bedroom window I could see the oak tree silhouetted against the moonlit sky. What S buried wanted to stay hidden forever, the phrase kept repeating in my mind like a haunting melody. Morning came with a welcome distraction, a knock at the front door. It was Daniel Underwood, Grandpa S' attorney, a handsome man in his late 30s with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Roselyn, I'm sorry to drop by unannounced," he said, stepping into the foyer. "I found some additional paperwork of your grandfather S that needs your attention." "It has no problem," and I replied, leading him to the kitchen where I'd been sorting through old recipe books. "Coffee, please." As I busied myself with the coffee maker, Daniel spread several documents across the oak table. The irony of the wood type wasn't tea lost on me. "Patrick was always extremely organized," Daniel commented, "but he left these in a separate file marked, 'When the time is right.' I believe that time is now." I set 2 mugs down and peered at the papers. Most seemed to be property records and old correspondence, but one caught my eye. A faded map of the property with the oak tree circled in red ink. Neptune chose that moment to announce himself with a piercing whistle from the living room. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That S. Neptune," I explained. "Grandpa S. Parrot. He has been with him for decades." "Ah, yes, the famous Neptune. Patrick mentioned him often. Said that bird knew more secrets than anyone else in his life." Say something in Daniel Lee's tone made me pause. Did my grandfather have many secrets? Daniel Lee's eyes met mine, then darted away too quickly. "Everyone has their share, don't they? Patrick was a private man in some ways, but he spoke of you constantly. He was so proud of you." Before I could press further, Neptune's voice rang out again, this time eerily precise in its imitation of my grandfather. "Dig beneath the spreading roots, before others come looking." Daniel E's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. That is unsettling. The bird sounds exactly like him. "He started doing it yesterday," I admitted, saying things about the oak tree and things being buried. A strange expression crossed Daniel's face, concern mixed with something I couldn't quite place. "What exactly has he been saying?" I repeated, Neptune's earlier message about what S buried not staying hidden. Daniel set his mug down carefully, as if deep in thought. "Your grandfather was an interesting man, Roselyn. Most people only saw his charming exterior. Successful businessman, generous community member, devoted grandfather. But there were depths to Patrick that few were privileged to know." "What do you mean?" Daniel seemed to choose his words carefully. "Patrick didn't always make his fortune through conventional channels. In his younger days he had connections that might surprise you." My throat tightened. Are you saying my grandfather was involved in something illegal? Not exactly illegal, Daniel backpedaled. More grey area. He never hurt anyone, but he came into possession of certain items through channels that weren't entirely above board. The revelation should have shocked me more than it did, but somehow it felt like confirmation of something I had always sensed beneath the surface. The reason for Grandpa's occasional late-night visitors, the mysterious phone calls he did take in his study, with the door firmly closed. What kind of items? I asked. Art, primarily. He had an eye for valuable pieces that had been, let's say, misplaced during turbulent times. He worked with government agencies later in life to return many pieces to their rightful owners, made amends in his own way. I thought about the beautiful paintings that had adorned our walls when I was growing up, many of which had mysteriously been donated over the years. What does this have to do with the oak tree? I asked. Daniel shook his head. I'm not entirely sure. Patrick never confided the specifics to me, but shortly before he passed, he mentioned wanting to set something right. One final piece of his past that needed resolution. Neptune's voice interrupted again, his words sending ice through my veins. Tell Bellamy I'm sorry. The locket belongs to her family. Daniel's face drained of color. Who S. Bellamy? I asked. Annabelle Morgan, Daniel whispered. She goes by Bellamy. Her family lost everything during a tumultuous period overseas, including a locket said to contain a map to their hidden family fortune. Patrick may have acquired that locket. My mind was spinning. The grandfather I knew, the man who'd taught me to always tell the truth, to stand up for what is right, had been living with these secrets all along. Is this Bellamy still alive? I asked. Very much so. She's been searching for that locket for years. It is the last connection to her family heritage. I stood up abruptly. I need a shovel. Daniel's eyes widened. Roselyn, wait. We don't know what's out there or who else might be looking for it. Patrick mentioned others in the message Neptune just conveyed. That could mean people who want the locket for less noble reasons than returning it to its rightful owner. As if to emphasize his point, there was a screech of tires outside. I moved to the window just in time to see a black luxury car parking across the street, a tall man in an expensive suit stepping out and surveying the house with obvious interest. Who's that? I asked. Daniel joined me at the window, his expression darkening. That's Liam Thornfield. He is a collector who specializes in acquiring items with complicated ownership histories. He and your grandfather had a falling out years ago. How would he know to come here now? News travels fast in certain circles. Patrick's death would have been noted, and if there were rumors about a valuable locket. Daniel let the implication hang in the air. Neptune's wings fluttered as he called out again, this time in a tone more urgent than before. Time is short, Rosie girl, beneath the oak, where the roots meet the stone. My childhood nickname sent a wave of emotion through me. Grandpa was the only one who'd ever called me Rosie girl. I need to find whatever S out there, I said, determination hardening within me. Not for any potential value, but because Grandpa wanted to make this right. And I'm going to help him do that. Daniel nodded slowly. I'll help you, but we need to be careful. Liam isn't known for his patience or his ethics. As we gathered supplies from the garage, a shovel, gardening gloves, a flashlight, though it was still morning, I caught Neptune watching us through the window, his head tilted as if in approval. My quiet life had just become considerably more complicated. My grandfather, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, had left me with a final mystery to solve. Whatever was buried beneath that oak tree wasn't just a physical object. It was a piece of his past, a hidden chapter of his life that he'd never shared with me. As Daniel and I slipped out the back door, I glanced over my shoulder at the front of the house, where Liam Thornfield was now approaching the porch with purposeful strides. We had a head start, but not much of one. The oak tree stood majestically at the far end of the garden, its ancient roots partially exposed, where they met an old stone retaining wall, exactly as Neptune had described. I gripped the shovel tightly, realizing I was about to unearth not just whatever my grandfather had hidden, but truths about him I'd never known. Sometimes the people we think we know best carry the deepest secrets, and sometimes it takes a parrot's perfect memory to bring those secrets into the light. The earth beneath the oak tree was surprisingly soft, as if it had been disturbed not too long ago. Daniel and I took turns digging, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky as we worked. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and my muscles protested. I spent my days as a conservator at the local museum, carefully preserving delicate artifacts, not digging holes in gardens. "Your grandfather was in remarkably good shape for his age," Daniel commented, pausing to wipe his brow. "I can't imagine him out here digging by himself." "Grandpa Patrick had his ways," I replied, thinking of how my grandfather always seemed to know the right people for any situation. "And he was stronger than he looked." A dull thud interrupted our conversation. My shovel had struck something solid. Daniel and I exchanged glances before dropping to our knees, using our hands to clear away the remaining soil. A small metal box emerged, its once shiny surface now tarnished and dirty. "It is locked," I said, examining the old-fashioned padlock securing the lid. "Let me see if—" Daniel began, but was interrupted by a sharp voice from behind us. "I believe I can be of assistance with that." We whirled around to find Liam Thornfield standing at the edge of the garden, his tall frame casting a long shadow over us. Up close, he was even more imposing, impeccably dressed with piercing eyes that seemed to assess everything in terms of monetary value, including, I suspected, the box in my hands. "Mr. Thornfield," Daniel said, stepping slightly in front of me, "this is private property." "Indeed it is," Liam replied smoothly, "and I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe Patrick and I had some unfinished business regarding what you currently holding." His gaze shifted to me. "You must be Roselyn. Patrick spoke highly of you." "Funny he never mentioned you," I replied, clutching the box tighter. A flicker of annoyance crossed Liam's face before his practiced smile returned. "Your grandfather and I moved in the same circles for many years. We had differences of opinion on how certain artifacts should be handled." "You mean you wanted to keep them in private collections while he wanted to return them to their rightful owners?" I said, the pieces falling into place. Liam's smile tightened. "A simplistic view, but not entirely inaccurate. The fact remains that I have legitimate interest in what's inside that box. I'm prepared to make a very generous offer." "It's not for sale," I replied automatically. "Everything has a price, Ms. Harper. Some are just higher than others." The tense standoff was broken by the sound of another car pulling into the driveway. Through the trees, I could see a vintage convertible with a woman at the wheel. "Ah," Liam said, his expression cooling. "I see Bellamy has received word as well." "You know her?" Daniel asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Our paths have crossed in pursuit of similar interests, though our motivations differ." Liam turned back to me. "I strongly suggest you consider my offer before opening that box. Some treasures come with complicated histories that might tarnish your grandfather's reputation if they came to light." The threat was thinly veiled, and anger flared within me. My grandfather wanted to make things right. That is exactly what I intend to do. Liam's eyes narrowed. Noble intentions, but potentially naive. "I'll leave you my card. When you understand the full scope of what you are dealing with, call me." He placed a business card on the garden table, nodded curtly, and walked back toward the front of the house. No sooner had he disappeared than Bellamy Morgan came into view. She was not what I had expected, younger than I had imagined, perhaps in her early 30s, with an elegant bearing that spoke of old-world grace despite her contemporary clothing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes widened when she saw the box in my hands. "You found it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Possibly," I replied cautiously. "Are you Annabelle Morgan?" She nodded, approaching slowly as if afraid we might flee. "Yes, though I prefer Bellamy. I've been searching for that locket for a very long time." "How did you know to come here?" Daniel asked. A sad smile played across her lips. "Your grandfather and I had been in contact for the past few months. He reached out to me, actually. Said he had something that belonged to my family and wanted to return it before—" Her voice faltered. "Before his time came. When I heard of his passing, I hoped he might have left instructions about the locket." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception but finding only open sincerity. Neptune, Grandpa's parrot, started repeating messages about something buried under this tree, including your name. Bellamy's eyes filled with tears. Patrick was a complicated man with a complicated past, but in the end, he tried to do the right thing. From inside the house came Neptune's unmistakable screech, followed by what sounded like breaking glass. Daniel, Bellamy and I exchanged alarmed glances before rushing toward the house, the box still clutched tightly in my hands. We burst through the back door to find the living room in disarray, a lamp knocked over, books scattered on the floor, and Neptune's cage door hanging open. The parrot himself was perched on top of a bookshelf, screeching furiously at Liam, who was attempting to corner him with a throw blanket. "What do you think you were doing?" I demanded, rage surging through me. Liam spun around, dropping the blanket. "Your bird attacked me when I came back to leave additional contact information," he claimed, though the deliberate destruction around the room suggested otherwise. "I was merely trying to calm him down." "By trapping him?" Bellamy asked skeptically. Neptune flew down from his perch, landing on my shoulder and nipping affectionately at my ear. "Danger!" he squawked in Grandpa's voice. "Trust the woman, not the snake." Liam's face darkened. That bird is remarkably well trained. Or perhaps there is more to this setup than meets the eye. His gaze settled on the box I was still holding. "I see you," brought the prize inside. "Perhaps we can all discuss this situation like reasonable adults now." "I think you should leave," Daniel said firmly, pulling out his phone. "Or I'll call the authorities and report you for breaking and entering." "That won't be necessary," came a new voice from the doorway. We all turned to see a woman in a crisp suit standing at the entrance to the living room, a police badge visible on her belt. "Detective Gloria Winters," she introduced herself. "I received an alert that there might be trouble at this address." Liam's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm an associate of the late Patrick Harper, simply paying my respects to his granddaughter." Detective Winters raised an eyebrow. "By ransacking her living room?" "The bird caused the damage," Liam insisted, though his excuse sounded weak even to my ears. Neptune chose that moment to speak again, this time in a perfect mimicry of Liam's voice. "Where is the locket? The old fool must have hidden it somewhere." The detective's expression hardened. "Interesting. I wasn't aware parrots could be such excellent witnesses." She turned to me. "Miss Harper, would you like to press charges?" Part of me wanted to see Liam Thornfield in handcuffs, but another part recognized that might complicate matters further. "Not at this time," I said carefully, "but I would appreciate it if Mr. Thornfield would leave and not return." Detective Winters nodded. "I'll escort him out and make sure he understands the concept of trespassing." Thomas, she gestured for Liam to precede her to the door. Before leaving, Liam turned to me one last time. "Think carefully about what you're getting involved in, Miss Harper. Some treasures are better left buried." After they departed, an uneasy silence filled the room. Neptune returned to his cage, seemingly satisfied with the outcome, while Daniel, Bellamy and I gathered around the kitchen table, where I placed the mysterious box. "How did the detective know to come here?" I asked. Daniel looked slightly sheepish. "I texted her when we saw Liam arrive. Gloria and I have been friends for years, and she's been keeping an informal eye on the house since your grandfather's passing. He specifically requested it, actually." This was yet another revelation about my grandfather's concerns he had never shared with me. "Your grandfather was trying to protect you," Bellamy said softly, seeming to read my thoughts. "Sound from his past, and from people like Liam Thornfield." "So it seems," I murmured, turning my attention to the locked box. "The question now is how to open this without damaging what's inside." "May I?" Bellamy asked, reaching for the box. Her fingers traced the old lock with familiarity. "This is a Morgan family lock. Our family manufactured them generations ago." From around her neck she pulled a small pendant, and to my surprise the end formed a tiny key which she inserted into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. "You had the key all along?" Daniel asked, incredulous. Bellamy shook her head. "Not the key to the box, the key to any Morgan lock. It was the one family heirloom I managed to hold on to. Her eyes met mine. "Would you like to do the honors? It is your grandfather's legacy." My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a gleaming golden locket, remarkably untarnished despite being buried. Beside it was a folded letter in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "It is beautiful," I whispered, lifting the locket carefully. It was larger than modern lockets, ornately decorated with intricate engravings and a small ruby set in its center. "The Morgan family locket," Bellamy confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd see it again." I handed it to her, and she held it reverently, tears streaming down her face. "The last time I saw this, my grandmother was wearing it, before everything was taken from us." "Read the letter," Daniel encouraged gently. With a deep breath, I unfolded the yellowed paper and began to read aloud. "My dearest Roselyn, if you rereading this, then Neptune has done his job well. I trained him to repeat these messages only after my passing, when the time was right. There is much about my life I never shared with you. In my younger days, before you came into my life, I made choices I am not proud of. I acquired items that were not mine to take, including the locket that accompanies this letter. The Morgan family locket has a history as complex as it is valuable. During a tumultuous time when the Morgan family lost everything, this locket disappeared, taken by those who recognized its significance beyond its material worth. It came into my possession through channels I want to detail here. At the time, I told myself I was merely a caretaker of history, but the truth is I was wrong to keep it. Inside the locket is something the Morgan family has sought for generations, a key to their heritage that goes beyond monetary value. It belongs with Bellamy, the last of her line. Liam Thornfield and others have pursued this locket for years. Be careful, Rosie girl. Not everyone believes in returning treasures to their rightful owners. I've arranged for Detective Winters to keep watch over the house after my passing. She is trustworthy and knows enough of the situation to help if needed. My final wish is for you to right this wrong. Return the locket to Bellamy Morgan. In doing so, you will help me make amends for at least one of my past mistakes. I'm sorry I kept these secrets from you. Know that everything I did, right or wrong, was ultimately to protect you and give you the life you deserved. All my love. Grandpa Patrick. The kitchen fell silent as I finished reading. Neptune let out a soft coo from his cage, as if acknowledging that his mission was complete. Bellamy was the first to speak, her fingers still caressing the locket. "Your grandfather contacted me about 3 months ago. He was already ill then, though he tried to hide it. He said he wanted to return something that belonged to my family, but needed time to prepare. I never expected." Her voice trailed off. "What is inside the locket?" Daniel asked. Patrick's letter mentioned it contains something valuable. Bellamy hesitated, then carefully opened the locket. Instead of a photograph, inside was an intricate miniature mechanism resembling a tiny compass or sundial with markings that made little sense to me. "This is a Morgan wayfinder," she explained. "It looks decorative to most people, but to those who know how to read it, it points to the location of our family's legacy." "What legacy?" I asked. "Made before the turmoil that cost my family everything. My ancestors were collectors and protectors of historical artifacts. They gathered items of cultural significance from around the world, not to own them, but to protect them during times of conflict, with detailed records of their provenance and rightful ownership. Like an unofficial private museum," Daniel suggested. Bellamy nodded. "Exactly. The collection was hidden when dangers arose, with the intention of returning each piece to its proper home when safe to do so. The wayfinder leads to the collection's location, a complete catalogue and evidence of rightful ownership for hundreds of priceless artifacts. I began to understand why people like Liam Thornfield would be desperate to possess the locket. With it, one could potentially claim ownership of an entire collection of historical treasures. So Grandpa was trying to make things right, by returning not just the locket, but access to these records that could help restore stolen history," I said slowly. "Yes," Bellamy confirmed. Patrick told me he spent years trying to track down the locket after he realized its true significance. He wanted his final act to be one of restoration, not possession. Neptune suddenly fluttered his wings and spoke again in Grandpa's voice. The past catches up to us all. Make it right, Rosie girl. A knock at the front door startled us all. Daniel went to check, returning moments later with Detective Winters. "I've sent Mr. Thornfield on his way with a clear warning," she announced. "But I doubt that is the last we've seen of him. Men like that are persistent when valuable items are involved." Her eyes fell on the open box and the locket in Bellamy's hands. "I see you found what Patrick wanted you to find." "You knew about this?" I asked. Detective Winters nodded. "Not all the details, but enough. Your grandfather and I had an understanding. He helped me solve a case many years ago by recognizing an artifact that had been stolen from a local museum. After that, we developed a certain mutual respect. When he became ill, he asked me to keep an eye on you and the house after he was gone." "Did you know Liam Thornfield would come looking?" Daniel asked. Patrick suspected as much. Men like Thornfield have extensive networks. News travels fast in certain circles. She turned to Bellamy. "Ms. Morgan, I presume. Patrick mentioned you would be involved in this matter." Bellamy nodded, carefully closing the locket and slipping its chain around her neck. "The locket is back where it belongs, thanks to Roselyn." Detective Winters smiled. Patrick would be pleased. But this may not be the end of the matter. The locket itself is valuable, but from what Patrick hinted, what it leads to is of far greater significance. "The Morgan collection," I said. "Precisely. And you can be certain Thornfield knows this too. He is not likely to give up easily." Neptune squawked from his cage, drawing everyone's attention. "Not safe here. Go to the cabin. Go now." Daniel and I exchanged glances. "The cabin?" he asked. "Patrick Sess fishing cabin upstate?" The detective nodded slowly. "So that would be a good place to regroup and decide next steps. Isolated, defensible, and few people know about it." But Neptune said, "Go now," I pointed out. "Why the urgency?" As if in answer to my question, the sound of car engines came from outside. Detective Winters moved quickly to the window, her expression darkening. "We have company. 2 vehicles, not local police. Thornfield works fast." "How did they find us so quickly?" Bellamy asked, alarm evident in her voice. "Tracking device," Neptune squawked, surprising us all with words that couldn't possibly have come from my grandfather. The Parrot was looking intently at Bellamy's purse. Detective Winters didn't hesitate. She grabbed Bellamy's designer handbag and turned it inside out. Hidden in an interior pocket was a small black disc. "He must have planted it when you arrived at the house," the detective said, dropping the device and crushing it beneath her heel. "Clever. Now we have even less time." "What exactly are we dealing with here?" I asked, suddenly feeling out of my depth. "This is about more than just a family heirloom, isn't it?" Bellamy's expression was grave. The Morgan collection contains items that certain collectors would kill to possess, artifacts that would be nearly impossible to acquire legally. The Wayfinder doesn't tie, it just lead to the collection. It provides proof of illegal acquisition for dozens of private collections around the world. "Including items in Thornfield's possession," Detective Winters added. Patrick implied that Thornfield's entire reputation as a legitimate dealer could be destroyed by what the Morgan records contain. The gravity of the situation hit me. This wasn't just about returning a family heirloom. It was about exposing potentially decades of art theft and fraud. "We need to leave now," Daniel said firmly. "I'll drive." "Take my car," Detective Winters insisted. "They'll be watching for yours. I'll create a diversion and meet you at the cabin tomorrow." She pulled out her keys and handed them to Daniel. "There's a service road behind the property that connects to the back alley. You can avoid the main street." I quickly packed a small bag while Daniel gathered supplies. Bellamy secured the locket safely around her neck, tucking it beneath her blouse. The detective prepared to confront Thornfield's men, her hand resting casually on her service weapon. "What about Neptune?" I asked, looking at the Parrot who had set this whole chain of events in motion. "He comes with us," Daniel said without hesitation. He's proven more valuable than any of us could have imagined. I approached Neptune's cage, speaking softly. We need to go somewhere safe, buddy. It might be a bumpy ride. To my surprise, Neptune stepped willingly onto my arm when I opened his cage door. Protect the truth, he said in Grandpa's voice. I'll finish what I started. As we slipped out the back door toward Detective Winter's unmarked car, I realized how drastically my life had changed in just a few short hours. The quiet existence I had known, cataloging and preserving museum artifacts, occasionally dating, spending weekends at home with books and tea, had been shattered by the revelations of my grandfather's secret past. Yet, somehow, it felt right, as if the path I had been on my entire life, my interest in historical preservation, my career working with artifacts, even my relationship with Grandpa Patrick and Neptune, had been preparing me for this moment. With Daniel behind the wheel, Bellamy in the back seat clutching her precious locket, and Neptune perched on my shoulder, we drove away from the only home I had ever known, toward an uncertain future and a legacy that went far beyond anything I could have imagined. What none of us realized was that the secrets buried beneath the oak tree were just the beginning. The true test of our resolve and the full extent of my grandfather's complicated past was yet to be revealed. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered from childhood fishing trips with Grandpa Patrick, a sturdy structure of weathered wood and stone, nestled among towering pines beside a tranquil lake. As Daniel navigated the final stretch of gravel road, Neptune grew increasingly animated on my shoulder, bobbing his head and murmuring softly. I think he recognizes this place, I said, reaching up to stroke his feathers. Your grandfather brought him here often, Bellamy commented from the back seat. Patrick told me this was his favorite retreat, where he came to think and remember. The interior of the cabin was dusty but otherwise undisturbed, a testament to how remote the location was. While Daniel secured the perimeter, checking locks and drawing curtains, I found an old brass perch for Neptune and set out water and seeds. We should be safe here for the night, Daniel said, returning from his inspection. The detective's car is hidden in the shed, and there is no sign anyone has been here in months. What happens now? I asked, the weight of the day's revelations settling heavily on my shoulders. We can hide forever. Bellamy sat at the rustic kitchen table, the locket now open in her palm as she studied the intricate wayfinder inside. This doesn't just point to a physical location, she explained. It has a code that needs to be deciphered. My grandmother taught me parts of it when I was young, but... Her voice trailed off as she frowned in concentration. Neptune suddenly flew from his perch to the old stone fireplace, landing on the mantel, where he began pecking at a loose stone. Look deeper, he squawked in Grandpa's voice. The truth hides in plain sight. Daniel crossed to the fireplace and examined the stone Neptune had indicated. With careful pressure it shifted, revealing a small hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. This is my grandfather's handwriting, I said as I opened it, recognizing the distinctive script that had filled birthday cards and notes throughout my childhood. The journal detailed Patrick's involvement with the Morgan collection over the decades, how he had acquired the locket from a disreputable dealer, initially unaware of its significance beyond its obvious value. When he discovered what it was, he could have returned it immediately, but the temptation to use it first had been too great. He followed the wayfinder, I read aloud, my voice catching as I pieced together my grandfather's confession. He found the Morgan collection hidden in an old bank vault, but instead of revealing its location, he took select pieces for himself, Bellamy finished softly, before returning everything else to museums and cultural institutions anonymously. The journal confirmed her assessment. Patrick had kept only a few items, beautiful pieces he couldn't bear to part with. But as the years passed, guilt had gnawed at him. One by one he had returned most of them, until only the locket remained. He was trying to make things right, I said, turning to the final pages. He tracked down Bellamy to return the locket, but then he became ill. That years when he buried it, Daniel suggested, to keep it safe until he could complete his plan. The last entry in the journal was dated just days before my grandfather Heir's passing. Neptune is my final insurance. If anything happens to me before I can give Bellamy the locket, he knows what to say to guide Roselyn. The cabin holds the key to everything. My final confession, the evidence against Thornfield and others like him, and directions to where I've secured the remaining Morgan artifacts for their rightful return. Forgive me, Rosie girl. I hope when all is revealed you can still remember your grandfather with love. My vision blurred with tears as I closed the journal. Despite his flaws and mistakes, Grandpa Patrick had spent his final days trying to make amends, to set right the wrongs of his past. There is more to find here, I said, wiping my eyes. Neptune knows. As if in confirmation, the Parrot flew to a landscape painting on the wall, a scenic view of the very lake outside the cabin's windows. Behind the reflection, he squawked, truth in water. Daniel carefully removed the painting, revealing a wall safe. Any idea what the combination might be? He asked. Neptune provided the answer, reciting a series of numbers in Grandpa's voice that I recognized as my birthday. The safe swung open to reveal a stack of files, a USB drive, and a small wooden box. The files contained meticulous documentation of art and antiquities theft, spanning decades, with names, dates, and photographic evidence. Liam Thornfield featured prominently, his smiling face appearing in covert photographs alongside stolen artifacts that later appeared in prestigious private collections. This is enough to destroy Thornfield's reputation and possibly send him to prison, Daniel said, leafing through the evidence. Your grandfather was building a case against him and others in that world. But why not turn this over to authorities while he was alive, I wondered. Bellamy, who had been examining the wooden box, looked up with understanding in her eyes. Because he was implicated too. Turning them in would have meant exposing his own past dealings. She opened the box to reveal a set of old keys labeled with bank names and numbers. These must access safe deposit boxes, where he stored the remaining Morgan artifacts. So that's our task, I said with growing clarity. Complete what he started. Return the Morgan collection to Bellamy. Use the evidence to bring down Thornfield and his associates, and finally bring everything into the light. Daniel nodded solemnly. It won to be easy. Thornfield has resources and connections. He won't go down without a fight. We have something he doesn't, I replied, glancing at Neptune, who watched us with those intelligent eyes. We have the truth on our side. As night fell over the cabin, we formulated our plan. Detective Winters would arrive the following morning, bringing legal authority to our mission. With her help, we would secure the remaining artifacts and file formal charges against Thornfield, using Grandpa's meticulously gathered evidence. I was just beginning to relax when Neptune suddenly tensed on his perch, his feathers ruffling in alarm. Danger comes, he warned, in a voice that chilled my blood because it wasn't to Grandpa's. It was his own interpretation of threat. The cabin's lights went out seconds later, plunging us into darkness. They found us, Daniel whispered, reaching for his phone. But how? The answer came in a smooth, cultured voice from the porch. Modern technology makes tracking quite simple, Liam Thornfield called through the door, especially when one can access cell tower data with the right connections. Now shall we discuss terms like civilized people, or must this become unpleasant? Daniel moved silently to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 2 men with him, he murmured, armed. I clutched the journal to my chest, mind racing. We had the evidence, the locket, and my grandfather's final confession. Everything Thornfield wanted destroyed. But we were outnumbered and outgunned. Ms. Harper, Thornfield continued when no one answered. I'm a businessman at heart. All I want are the locket and any sensitive materials your grandfather may have collected. In return, you all walk away unharmed, free to live your lives without further interference from me. Don't trust the snake, Neptune squawked softly, repeating his earlier warning. Bellamy moved closer to me, her expression resolute. We need to stall until the detective arrives, she whispered. Is there another way out of this cabin? The cellar, I replied, remembering childhood hide-and-seek games. It has an old tunnel that leads to the boathouse, an escape route from Prohibition days when this was a smuggler's cabin. Daniel nodded. Take everything and go. I'll keep them talking. We were not leaving you, I insisted. You don't have a choice. The evidence needs to reach the authorities. I can buy you time. His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. Trust me, Roselyn. Before I could protest further, Thornfield's patience ran out. I am giving you 1 minute to open this door before my associates take more direct action, he called. Daniel squeezed my hand once before moving toward the door. Get to the cellar, he whispered. Now, with Neptune on my shoulder and Bellamy at my side, I gathered the evidence, the journal and the box of keys, slipping toward the hidden cellar door beneath an old rug. The last thing I heard as we descended was Daniel's voice, measured and calm, engaging Thornfield in negotiation. The tunnel was narrow and damp, lit only by the flashlight on my phone. Neptune remained unusually quiet, as if understanding the need for silence. When we emerged in the small boathouse, the night air carried the sound of raised voices from the cabin. We need to hurry, Bellamy urged, helping me into the old rowboat. Daniel cannot hold them off forever. We pushed off from the dock, rowing quietly across the still black water. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain Thornfield's men would hear it across the lake. Neptune suddenly tensed on my shoulder, his gaze fixed on the cabin where a single gunshot shattered the night. Daniel, I gasped, nearly dropping the oar. Keep moving, Bellamy insisted, though her own face had gone pale. We honor his sacrifice by completing the mission. We reached the far shore as lights began moving around the cabin and boathouse, Thornfield's men discovering our escape. With Neptune leading the way, surprisingly adept at navigating in the darkness, we made our way through the woods to the remote country road that circled the lake. There should be a gas station about 2 miles east, I said, recalling trips to town for supplies during vacations past. We can call for help from there. The walk was tense and exhausting, every snapping twig or rustling leaf sending spikes of fear through me. Had Daniel survived? Would Thornfield's men catch up to us before we reached safety? The weight of my grandfather's legacy, both his mistakes and his attempts at redemption, pressed heavily on my shoulders. Neptune remained our steadfast companion, occasionally flying ahead to scout the path, returning to my shoulder with soft, reassuring sounds. Grandpa Patrick had trained him well, not just to repeat phrases, but to understand danger and offer comfort. Dawn was breaking when we finally reached the small gas station, its lights a beacon of hope in the growing light. The sleepy attendant was startled by our appearance, disheveled, exhausted, and accompanied by an African grey parrot, but he allowed us to use the phone. To my immense relief, Detective Winters answered on the first ring. "Roselyn, are you safe?" "We are tree at Oakley, S-gas on Route 16, I said, words tumbling out. Thornfield found the cabin. There was a gunshot. "Daniel is fine," she interrupted. "He with me now. Minor flesh wound only. We be about 15 minutes from your location." Tears of relief flooded my eyes. Daniel was alive. We still had a chance to complete what Grandpa Patrick had started. When Detective Winters' car pulled into the gas station, I nearly collapsed with exhaustion and relief. Daniel emerged from the passenger seat, his left arm bandaged, but otherwise appearing unharmed. Without thinking, I threw myself into his embrace. "I thought we'd lost you," I whispered against his shoulder. "Not a chance," he replied with a small smile. Thornfield wanted information more than violence. The shot was a warning that went wide. The detective arrived just in time to send them scattering. Detective Winters was already examining the evidence we salvaged from the cabin. "This is extraordinary," she said, leafing through Patrick's documentation. "Enough to bring down not just Thornfield, but an entire network of illegal art dealers." "What happens now?" Bellamy asked, the locket still secure around her neck. "Now we go on the offensive," the detective replied. "I've already contacted the FBI art crime team. They're reassembling in the city as we speak. Thornfield and his associates, 1T, escaped this time." The events of the next week unfolded with dizzying speed. The evidence Patrick had gathered proved devastating. Raids were conducted simultaneously at multiple locations, including Thornfield's luxurious penthouse, where several stolen artifacts were recovered. The man himself was arrested while attempting to board a private jet. his confident facade finally crumbling as he faced the consequences of decades of illegal activities. Using the keys from the wooden box, we recovered the remaining Morgan artifacts from safe deposit boxes across 3 states. Each piece was carefully documented, its provenance verified using Bellamy's family records combined with Patrick's detailed notes. "Your grandfather was meticulous," Bellamy remarked as we catalogued the final items in a secure room at the museum where I worked. Even when he was taking things he shouldn't have, he kept perfect records of where they came from and who they belonged to. "I think he always knew, deep down, that someday he would make things right," I replied, carefully examining a small jade figurine that would soon be returned to a temple in Cambodia. Neptune watched from a perch we had set up in the corner of the room, occasionally commenting on the proceedings with phrases that made me smile through tears. Little by little, I was coming to terms with the complex truth of who Patrick Harper had really been. Not just the loving grandfather who had raised me, but a man with flaws and regrets who had ultimately chosen redemption. The Morgan collection itself proved to be everything legend had claimed, an extraordinary assembly of cultural treasures saved from destruction during times of conflict, each with detailed documentation of its origin and rightful ownership. Bellamy worked tirelessly with international cultural authorities to arrange for the return of each piece to its proper home. "This is a historian's dream," Daniel commented one evening as we sorted through the artifacts. Our relationship had deepened through the shared adventure, evolving from friendship into something more profound. "Your grandfather's legacy turned out to be something remarkable after all." "It's not just his legacy," I replied, glancing at Neptune, who was contentedly preening his feathers. "Without Neptune, none of this would have happened. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing when he trained him to deliver those messages." The parrot looked up at the sound of his name, tilting his head in that curious way of his. "Family protects family," he said in Grandpa's voice, a phrase I hadn't heard him use before. It brought fresh tears to my eyes. 3 months after the morning Neptune first spoke my grandfather's mysterious message, we gathered in a special ceremony at the National Museum. Bellamy, now officially recognized as the Morgan family heir, formally donated the collection for preservation and eventual repatriation of each piece to its cultural home. The Wayfinder locket would remain with her, a symbol of her family's commitment to protecting cultural heritage. Detective Winters, promoted for her role in bringing down the art theft ring, stood proudly in her dress uniform. Daniel, his arm fully healed, remained by my side, his hand a reassuring presence against mine, and Neptune, perched on a special stand we had brought for the occasion, surveyed the proceedings with dignified approval. As we watched Bellamy address the assembled dignitaries and press, Daniel leaned close to whisper in my ear, "Your grandfather would be proud. You've more than honored his final wish." "We honored it," I corrected him, squeezing his hand, "all of us together." Later that evening, as we walked through the quiet garden behind what was now my home, Grandpa Patrick's house felt truly mine at last. Neptune flew to the old oak tree, landing on one of its sprawling branches. "Journey's end," he announced in Grandpa's voice, sounding satisfied and at peace. "All is well." I smiled up at the parrot, who had changed everything with his perfect memory and impeccable timing. "Yes, Neptune, all is well." The investigation into Thornfield's network continued to unfold in the months that followed, each new revelation confirming the extent of my grandfather's knowledge and his determination to bring the truth to light. Patrick Harper's name was eventually cleared of wrongdoing through a specialized amnesty program for those who voluntarily returned cultural artifacts, his final actions recognized as restitution for his earlier mistakes. Bellamy used her restored family resources to establish a foundation dedicated to recovering stolen cultural treasures and returning them to their places of origin. She offered me a position as lead conservator, which I gladly accepted. Daniel, finding his legal expertise valuable in navigating the complex international laws surrounding cultural property, joined as legal counsel. Neptune continued to surprise us with occasional new phrases in my grandfather's voice, little gifts from the past that appeared when least expected. Sometimes they were practical warnings about everyday dangers, sometimes tender messages of love, and sometimes simply observations about life that made me laugh or cry. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on the porch swing watching fireflies dance across the garden, Neptune settled between us and spoke in a perfect imitation of Grandpa Patrick's gentle laugh. "Love finds a way," he said clearly. "Even through the mistakes and the years and the secrets, love always finds a way." I rested my head on Daniel's shoulder, watching the stars emerge above the grand old oak tree that had started our adventure. The truth of my grandfather has passed, had been buried there, but so had the seeds of redemption, of forgiveness, and of a future I could never have imagined. Sometimes the people we think we know best carry the deepest secrets, but sometimes those secrets, when finally brought into the light, reveal not just shadows but unexpected beauty as well. My grandfather had been more complicated than I ever knew, but in the end, what defined him most was not the mistakes he had made, but his determination to make them right. And sometimes it takes a Parrot's perfect memory to remind us that even flawed legacies can become something beautiful when rooted in love and truth. Neptune rustled his feathers contentedly, settling into sleep as the evening deepened around us. The journey that had begun with his mysterious message was complete. The past had been honored, justice had been served, and the future, with all its bright possibilities, stretched before us like an open road. All because a parrot had remembered his master's last words, and I had been brave enough to listen. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.